This video with Mateo is a great deep dive into shamanism, ayahuasca, and 5-MeO DMT toad venom. I need you to stick around to the end because I'm going to point you to the best resource online about shamanism, ayahuasca, and 5-MeO DMT. It's free and you don't even need to leave YouTube, but it'll be at the end of the video after the interview.
This video is for harm reduction purposes only. Please speak with a doctor, a lawyer, or any legal authorities necessary to make sure that psychedelic ingestion is legal in your country of residence.
Hey everybody, we have Matthew Pallamary today with us, who's the author of over 17 books, and we're going to be talking about shamanism and ayahuasca and his new book that just came out, Pica Flores. So Matt, or Mateo, do you want to tell us a little about your background and your history, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you, James, so much for having me, for starters. I am a mad lover of altered states. I have over 50 years of experience with altered states, starting with getting dizzy when I was 3, and then hyperventilating, and then sniffing glue, and then, of course, weed and alcohol and all that. And then my first LSD experience was in, I think, 71. Very strong stuff. And so I went through a period of everything until my early 20s where I decided to take a break from everything. And I took a break. I was a vegetarian for 23 years. I took a break from everything for 13 years. Until I was connected with Terence McKenna, who became a friend. And I was very much influenced by his book, Food of the Gods. And when I realized that there could be spirituality connected to psychedelics and altered states, I was hooked. So from there, I started going to ethnobotany seminars. I finally connected with someone who was leading journeys into the Peruvian Amazon, working with ayahuasca. And so now I have over 20 years of experience with ayahuasca. I've done a dozen extended plant dietas. And I've also worked all throughout. I worked up in the Andes with Huachuma, San Pedro cactus. I got to do the whole peyote hunt and huichol ritual and peyote hunt and overnight ceremony. And I've done a ton of Sasha Shulgin's research chemicals. And I also have 10 or 12 years of intense experience with 5-MeO DMT. So I can get on any of those paths, and I could go on forever about my stuff. But people can find out the most about me by going to my website. So let's keep it at that for this introduction.
Well, great. Real quick, just tell us about the website, and then also just a real quick overview of what the new book's about.
Yeah, so my website is mattpallamary.com, mattpallamary.com. And if anybody goes there, I have tons of podcasts. I have TV shows, radio shows, video, lectures, all of that. They just got to dig down into media, and they can find lots of content there. My new book, Pica Flores, is about my experiences with the hummingbird spirit, which came to me during my jungle dietas in the Amazon, where there's a whole concept of animal and plant communication that happens with ayahuasca and in visionary states. And the hummingbird, and they say in the lore of the jungle that you don't choose your animal spirit, it chooses you. And so the hummingbird chose me. And first I had a number of years with condor spirit that was given to me by a shaman, an old shaman. And then one time I was in a ceremony, and all of a sudden my legs started going a mile a minute, and my body started making these movements. And if I didn't have the experience I had, I would have freaked out. And my visions were really high frequency, color, pastels of beauty, and it was just this blissful experience. And my legs were going like a mile a minute, and my whole body like... So the next day when we were integrating, one of my bros came in and says, I knew it was going to be a really good experience because just before the ceremony, a hummingbird came up and flew right up and hovered before my face. And right when he said that, I realized I had been the hummingbird. And at that exact same moment, my girlfriend at the time said to me, you were the hummingbird. It all happened like all at once. Since then, I've been studying them and researching them. So this book has the first part about in depth about those personal experiences with me. The second section is all about old myths, American Indian and Inca, pre-Inca mythologies and stories of hummingbirds. And then the third part is all about their amazing physical state, their metabolism, how big their hearts are, all the facts and figures about them. And I did a lot of research on it. It was a fun book to write. It actually wrote itself, and my best books kind of write themselves. So that's kind of there's a thumbnail description right there. Yeah.
So as we move on to talk about psychedelic, you had a lot of then ayahuasca, and just kind of put everything that's some derivative of DMT in one basket. And then I know in one book I was reading of yours, there's some MDMA experiences, LSD, and mescaline. Which of those, did all of those provide some growth? Did you find any of those didn't provide some growth for you? And then which ones, was it the DMTs or maybe the other traditional psychedelics that had a little more growth for you?
Well, the answer is yes. But let me qualify that. When I was a young man, I wanted to experience everything I possibly could. Some things just didn't talk to me. I tried heroin. I didn't really care for it. I tried ketamine a number of different ways, just didn't care for it. LSD really talked to me. When I first started researching ayahuasca, which was about 30 years ago, and I read The Vine of the Soul and The Vine of the Dead, it's like, I got to try that. And people would say to me, wow, you're really brave going into the jungle to try that. And I said, it's got nothing to do with bravery. When I heard that stuff, there was no way I couldn't not try it. And it took me 10 years to find it before I finally did. And my first time in the jungle was in 2000. And since then, I mentioned I did a dozen 10-day intense plant dietas. I also spent probably a month and a half with the Shipibo Indians. I've worked in 3 or 4 different traditions now, but the original one that I was originally brought down into the jungle to do has been the purest. It's been the best. So the psychedelics all seem to talk to me. I've had a love affair with cannabis for over 50 years. Right now I'm on a break because I got to smoking it so much. It just wasn't affecting me anymore. And that's a waste. And when I'm into a really hard writing a book, they call it writer's crack. I drink coffee in the morning and weed in the afternoon, and I would really produce. But right now I'm on a hiatus from everything. But it's the psychedelics that really talk to me the most. I never liked like Valium. I got into a lot of trouble with downers back when Quaaludes were around. Anything that was depressive I didn't like. Anything that was expansive I had a mad love affair with. That's probably a good way to put it.
So what changes have you seen in yourself from sort of these larger macrodose trips?
Okay, so it's interesting. If you do one ayahuasca ceremony, there's an integration. If you do 3 in a row, which we do a lot, there's an overarching integration of all 3 journeys. If you do a 10-day dieta, now when I do 10-day dietas, I do 5 group ceremonies and 2 by myself. They bring me the medicine and leave me alone, like that. So there's an overarching integration of that whole experience. It's like one journey. And what I've discovered over these years is that all of my journeys of all those years is an even bigger arc of integration. So sometimes something from 5 years ago comes to me now and I'm like, oh, so there's each, it's like writing stories. There's a smaller arc of a chapter. There's a story arc of a bigger one, and they keep going and going. So in my humble opinion, in my experience, basically I found my way home. And when I say that, what I mean is I found the path. I've gotten out of my head and into my heart, and I become more heart-centered. You never arrive. It's infinite. Anybody that tells you they're enlightened, run. Anybody that tells you there's a shaman, run. But it just continues unfolding. And if I never took anything ever again, I'm fine. I don't need to take anything. I like to tell people right now I'm permanently altered. But all the experience that I've had and all the people that have mentored me, I now have been leading ceremonies for, maybe 15 years now, because I feel an obligation to pass on the gifts that have been given to me.
Okay, that's great. And what sort of integration do you think that you've done that you could kind of share that would help others in regards to integrating their experience, psychedelic experiences that they have?
Yeah, there's a few main things I like to touch on. One of them is this. If you get a revelation of something and you see something during a visionary experience, just because you've seen it doesn't mean you've resolved it. I can't tell you how many people I've seen say, oh, now I get it, I realize it. And then they go back into their regular everyday life and they go right back to what they were doing. So, what a waste, right? So you have to have integrity with yourself. And integrity is the key word. And there's a lot of temptation, I've worked with done ceremonies with beautiful women and they're falling at my feet. And there's a part of me that's like, whoa, I want that, but I can't do it because they've come to me to get healed. They're being vulnerable in my presence. And as beautiful as they are, I have to respect that and deny myself and really be there for them. So you can see different things all the time that can come up. And one of the things I love about ayahuasca is its unpredictability. You never know what's going to come up, how it's going to come up, what ways is it going to come up. You just never know. So I have what I like to call my time travel theory. And it goes like this. Maybe during an ayahuasca ceremony, I go back to a fight I had with a guy 25 years ago. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, what an idiot that guy was. God, I hated his guts. I was beating his face in and blah, blah. And then it suddenly dawned on me, oh, wait a minute. I was an idiot too, right? And it was actually a co-creation. So when I realized my part in it, and accept that, and then kind of let go of that creation, when I come back from that visionary experience, I no longer have that old way of thinking about it. So I like to characterize it as I have changed my past now because I don't see it the way I used to. And now that whole creation is gone, and now I'm unburdened by it. And it's just interesting because what happens as you go forward and you do this stuff is suddenly you're in a situation that used to drive you crazy, and it has no charge to it anymore, and you don't know when it left. And so all the energy that you are putting toward that is now free to you in different ways. And so that is expansive and very magical.
That's great. Agree. That's very much, you summed it up better than me. When people explain what goes on, I talk about, there's a regression therapy model that I learned years ago. And that's actually fairly similar about working with the memory to look at it in a different light, and then you kind of act differently. And I think when you combine that with psychedelics, it becomes actually much more effective than if you do it with just completely sober. So no, that makes complete sense. So do you think people should experiment with traditional psychedelics before they get to ayahuasca? Maybe something lighter to do some of the base healing? Or do you think ayahuasca is maybe an effective entry point?
Well, one of the things I'm always preaching, so to speak, is that these are highly subjective experiences. So everybody has their own unique background. Everybody has their own unique traumas. Everybody is neurochemically different. There's genetics, there are other things. So I always go on a case-by-case basis, and before I will have anybody in a ceremony that I'm leading, I do an in-depth interview with them. And I ask, if they've had some experience, I think it's better. I used to be for years and years and years, everybody's first experience was always a high dose of LSD because that was my favorite for a long time. But there's something about mushrooms where they can come in waves. And don't try this at home, folks, but I've always been a kamikaze. I always, even when I didn't want to, I always did mega doses first. My first experience with LSD was 4-way LSD. It took me like 7 or 8 times before I could handle a whole hit of it. And it was made by a chemist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which we used to call Mental Institute for the Touched. And he went by the name My Favorite Martian. And then the other thing I always did is I would always have them listen to Dark Side of the Moon as their first experience. But with some mushrooms and some experience, they need to be aware of altered states, you know? But having said that, I went into the jungle some years ago with a guy. He was a Hollywood producer guy, and he had never done anything before, and he jumped right into it full bore and did the whole thing. And he tore it up. He was great. But everybody's different. So you need to know before you go in that you're going to deal with something. You're going to be perceiving things in ways that you had never experienced before, unless possibly in dreaming states, and that's a whole nother animal, which I can go off on that too. But it really is a unique one-on-one thing because everybody is a unique individual in all the different ways I mentioned. A little bit of experience is better, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. Can you explain at maybe a high level, or I guess at whatever level you'd like, what shamanism is and like how that has played out through your plant medicine and ayahuasca experiences of the past?
Yeah, so technically speaking, the word shaman comes from Siberian Tungusk region, and it was Saman, S-A-M-A-N, means one who knows. So my brothers in the jungle, everybody else calls them shamans. They refer to themselves as either vegetalistas or plant men. I worked with this one real old timer, and he said, I am a plant man, and my father was a plant man, and his grandfather was a plant man before him, and I come from a long line of plant men. I personally do not like the word shaman because of all the pop culture woo-woo. And anybody that comes up to me, I'll just say this right now, anybody comes up to anybody, if they say to you, hi, I'm a shaman, run. Because it's an ego thing. And all the pop culture woo-woo, you know. I don't like, people have called me that. One time I went off on a talk show host guy, and I was apologizing later. I was like, don't call me that, you know. But if I make too much of a stink about it, it draws attention to it. So what I like to say now is everybody is a shaman, but most of us just don't know it because there are inherent abilities. So a shaman is a person who is familiar with navigating altered states, and one of the definitions of shamanism among many is the wounded healer. So let's say, for argument's sake, what happens with your shadow is you see things in people, and your shadow will project onto them. That will recognize itself in the other person. It will project onto them, and then it will judge that person. So it doesn't see it. You don't see it inside of yourself. And it's a protective mechanism. It's misguided. It's trying to help you. So where you may primarily have judged somebody before, this goes back to the little example I gave about getting in a fight with somebody 20 years ago or whatever, right? You go back to that and you realize, oh my God, that's me. That's a reflection of me. And once you fully realize that and embrace it and don't deny it and accept it inside of yourself, the gift of that is compassion. So the next time you may see that situation in somebody, you're not judging them like you have for all of your life. You have compassion and you understand the psychology behind it because you've discovered it within yourself. And then if they're willing and they're open, then you can be helpful in helping them to heal themselves, because nobody can heal anybody. You can help people to heal themselves. But anybody who takes credit, you know, I am the healer, I'm the light worker, run. Because it's just about helping each other. We're all finding our way home. That's the way I like to think about it.
How prevalent in Latin America is it running into a shaman or a medicine man or a plant man who has less than pure intentions? You hear more about this now. Is this just people just kind of coming in their own narrative, or is this really an issue?
It is an issue, and by the way, that's an awesome question. Thank you for bringing it up. So there's integrity is an issue, and it's very hard to find people with integrity. For me, the person I found who finally brought me in had already been going for 15 years. And the main people that I work with have epic integrity. But for every one of those, there's probably 10 that don't. There's a lot of history of the shamans will get the beautiful women and say, come with me down to the river at midnight and I'll give you a special healing. There are stories of some women being actually put into, they come down all starry-eyed and wide-eyed and, oh, they're a shaman, and they just totally give themselves up. And then they get more or less enslaved. There's also a lot of desperation. There's a lot of poverty. So people will come up and sell you anything. Say, oh, this is ayahuasca and this is your spiritual thing. And if you're somebody who's down there all eye-wide and, oh, I'm getting spiritual and I'm a light worker, oh, spirit has brought this to me, they'll take advantage of you in a heartbeat. So you need to find somebody who has integrity, somebody who's tried and proven. It has to have really good references from somebody you trust. Because and it's getting worse with all the ayahuasca shamanism. I mean, that's a whole other thing that drives me a little bit nuts. I think things are getting out of control to a large degree. It's hitting the mainstream. I see some of the stuff that Hollywood does, and it drives me crazy because it doesn't represent it. And one of my personal missions is to try to really get the truth out there. This stuff is not for everybody. It's not, growth in the work is not fun. It's just not fun. It's painful. The results are wonderful, but you got to pay your dues. One of the things they say in the lore of the jungle is that you have to prove that you're worthy. All of the suffering you go through, physically, psychologically, spiritually, you have to prove that you're worthy of the knowledge of the gift that the plants have to give you before you'll get what you need. And you need to be ready to embrace that. You have to embrace the light, and you have to embrace the dark equally. You can't say, I just want to be all light and bliss. That's all a bunch of crap too. Because you can't have one without the other. And if you're going to learn the whole thing, you need to see the light and the dark almost equally in a lot of ways.
Okay. That's right on, I think. What issues or maybe even benefits do you see in working with an ayahuasca provider or guide who maybe isn't a non-native, maybe is a Westerner, maybe you're doing it in North America? What have you seen in regards to that, or do you have maybe some more traditionalist views that it needs to be with someone, in more closer to the original kind of geographic areas where this came from?
Yeah, that's a great question also. Kudos to you for thinking these things through. So it's funny because I've struggled with that, but I've come to, it ties in with what I was just saying. Okay. The guys that I work with, the purest tradition, those guys are mestizos. So they're not pure Indians. Mestizo is a mixed race. Now, I've worked with Shipibo Indians.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
For your audience. Mestizos.
Yeah, for your audience. Good point. Yeah.
The Shipibos I've worked with, their tradition is not as pure as these mestizo guys that I've worked with. They are the carriers of an ancient tradition that goes back to prehistoric times. Now, when I first started working with them, they were coming up to the United States. They would come up twice a year, and we would do ceremonies, and then we would go down there. And I did that for the better part of 20 years. But as things have expanded, they haven't been able to come up anymore. My mentor is now, he's retired. He's well into his 80s, he's pushing almost 90. He can't do it anymore because of his heart. So it's been passed on to me and some other people. So I am a carrier of that pure tradition. When I go down there, those guys are my brothers. I mean, they have a lot of respect for me. I have immense respect for them. So here I am, a dirty white boy, carrying this prehistoric tradition because they can't come anymore. So though I may be far from pure, I'm carrying this tradition that I was brought up in. But having said that, I can't tell you how many people go down to the jungle and they do 1 or 2 ceremonies and suddenly they're an expert and they're writing books and they're leading ceremonies, and that drives me a little crazy. So it kind of gets back to knowing I'm in that line of the tradition, and if I was not carrying that tradition, it would not be available to anybody. So I have to be the dirty white boy who's doing that, because otherwise it would just disappear. And anything that gets carried on, traditionally speaking, has to be carried on by somebody. So I really work hard to stay within the purity of the tradition. But having said that, you have to evolve with the times a bit too. One of the things of shamanism is that it changes with the times in order to be viable. There's a lot of things that happen now
Sure.
that they didn't have before. So it kind of ties in with keeping the integrity. Even some of the ones who are quote unquote indigenous are not always the best. I've had some experiences with some Indians who did not have integrity and were taking advantage of women. We're all human. In the end, we're all human. So it has to do with being in the integrity of a tradition to make it work, as opposed to falling to the challenges of ego and, power and all that. I hope that's a good answer. It's a touchy subject.
That is a great answer. And actually, I'm gonna actually add on to it just one little more and ask a even touchier question. I didn't actually put this in the question list, but within it, so, and partially this is, I think, an issue just of Westerners just coming up with ayahuasca and ayahuasca ceremony, and that's one thing, even though it's now spread out over so many countries. And you did, and I do agree with this idea of ayahuasca and shamanism and all these methodologies need to, change and grow with the times. Do you feel in so many of these cultures that have used plant medicine, they were not giving them to groups of people, or they weren't doing anything that looked anything at all like what these, we'll just call them group retreats, look like? Do you feel that needs to be communicated better, that yes, maybe you're in certain settings, your shaman has maybe, your medicine man has come from 3 or 5 generations of this, but at the end, maybe it was just, in many traditions, allegedly, it was just the shaman who was taking it and then providing maybe the insight for the village, and now they're giving it, but no one, wants to come down. No one's going to fly down from LA to, watch a guy have a vision for him. So, do you think that needs to be communicated better, or do you think it's okay and it's just getting lost in the hype, that people really are overselling this historic precedent that they have, or how do you feel about all of that?
Yeah, it's a bit of everything. So one thing is, traditionally, particularly in the Amazon, they would do the ceremonies, but they didn't do integrations like we do. That's a Western thing. And what they would do is, if they had something coming up, they would gather and have a ceremony to consider what's going on. One of the greatest examples I like to give is if they were going to go on a hunt, and I like to use the jaguar as an example. They would go into a ceremony getting ready for the hunt. They would connect with the spirit of the jaguar, or torongo is what they call. They would connect and they would kind of hunt it in their visions and get permission and connect with its spirit. And then when they go out on the hunt, the regular actual hunt was actually more of a follow-through of what already happened in the visions. But one of the things that happens when you do the 10-day dieta is you lose all your human smells. You begin to smell like the jungle. No sex, all those things, pheromones. Jaguars, their sense of smell is something like 500 times that of humans, maybe even more. It's far greater. So you do this and you no longer smell human, and you smell like the jungle. So in many respects, for the jaguars, in many respects, you become invisible, and it gives you a hunting advantage. So any decisions or things that need to be done, they would do in a group setting. And one of the things about ayahuasca ceremonies that I've experienced, and I believe, is that when you do it with a bunch of people, it's an individual experience in a group setting. So even though you're having an individual experience, you have the energy of the whole group at your disposal. And one of the things that drew me to ayahuasca in the first place is one of the first Westerners was Richard Spruce. I think it was in 1865. He called the active component telepathine. And that was one of the things that hooked me. So I've had a number of telepathic experience, and I think it's because you connected more with your heart when you're doing the ayahuasca. Now, moving forward into more modern times, who's going to argue at how whacked the world is right now and how everything is out of balance and screwed up? So I think the medicine, for lack of better words, for the medicine for the masses, or at least the ones who are able to handle it, because it certainly is not for everybody, I think it's become a necessity going forward. And it's evolving, because if you go back to the days, there's a saying someone said, might have been Richard Plotkin some years ago, that every time a shaman dies, an old shaman, a whole library dies with him. So the knowledge has to be carried on. And that's a big part of what I'm all about, is trying to carry on that knowledge and pass on what I've been gifted with, that I paid a lot of dues for. I mean, I've given up my life for this stuff. To carry forward, because I think the medicine is very badly needed for the masses. But again, like we were just talking about, it's kind of getting out of control too, It's kind of a double-edged sword. But, if somebody comes and they're sincere and they have a good heart and they're really willing to do the work, who is anybody to deny them the opportunity of healing themselves? Because every time you heal, well, I take that back. I didn't mean that. Anytime you help somebody to heal themselves, they can gain the ability to help someone else. So I like to think of it as lighting little fires here and there, and spreading the word, so to speak.
Okay. So that actually, that fits in with the next question. I think you answered a lot of it, but maybe there's more you want to add into it. Who is ayahuasca best for, and what is the ideal setting then to take it? And you can add into that, like, do you think one ceremony is enough, or 3, or something more intricate?
I mean, again, I'm a hardhead. I'm a known hardhead. So for me, the more the better.
Good.
But I have one buddy. He had a bad drinking problem. He did one ceremony and got his butt kicked, and that was it. He was cured of his alcoholic. He never drank again. That was that. But it's an unfolding thing, and you never do arrive. You never become enlightened. I love it because it's infinite. And of course, the more you learn and the more you experience, the more responsibility you have, and the more and more integrity becomes an issue. Because if you go against integrity, you'll fall much harder and much more. So the more you learn, the more responsibility that there is with it. And you got to stick with it to go with it. So how much responsibility does anybody want to take on? How far do you want to go with it? Some people I know, I don't think ever need it. I know some women who are tremendously intuitive and in touch, and they just don't need it. Again, me, I'm a hardhead. I need to be hit over the head with a frickin' sledgehammer to knock any sense into me. And even then, it's debatable how much it gets in there, right? But it really is a unique, subjective, individual thing. But if you become, I like to think of myself as a mama's boy, meaning ayahuasca is the mother, and I'm a mama's boy in that respect. And it's also, in terms of archetypes, it's considered the dark feminine. So if you have the ability and the need to go deep, the more you're going to benefit from it. But the deeper you go, the harder the work is going to be, and the more you're going to pay the dues for it. So you kind of get what you pay for, so to speak. But some people just don't need it as much. I'm dedicated. I'm hooked. It's made such a tremendous change in my life. The biggest thing that happened to me is it helped me to reconnect with my feminine side, which was non-existent. I went for 30 years of my life without ever crying. I was a tough guy. I was a street fighter, all that stuff. And when I reconnected with my feminine, I went through a few years of the littlest thing would set me off crying, bawling my eyes out. And the funny thing happened in relation to that is my intuition just went whoop. So it helps to become more balanced. And everybody's different, you know. I think that's good. I go more if you want.
No, that's great for that. Um, where have mescaline-based plant medicines fit into this journey for you?
They've been great. So I did a lot of work with ayahuasca. I had done some pure mescaline over the years, which was delightful. And then I was working, I had done a lot of work with ayahuasca, and then I got turned on to Huachuma, which is San Pedro. And the first few times I did that, after with the ayahuasca places I'd been, I was like, what? What's the big deal? What's happening? It took me a while to get to learn the subtleties of it. But after that, I went up, I spent a month and a half in the Andes working with a Huachuma shaman throughout the Andes doing different ceremonies in different ways, and I learned the nuances of it. It really connects you. In some ways, it's interesting. I also, as I mentioned, I got to do the whole Huichol pilgrimage. I went down to Huiracuta. I did the overnight ceremony, the peyote hunt. We did the pilgrimage to Mount Quemado, all those things. Peyote is it's considered like a nighttime medicine, and Huachuma is considered a daytime medicine. Peyote is done more in a ceremony, kind of in one spot. Huachuma is generally done more as a walkabout. And it opens you up in different ways. To me, you start getting into different substances. Some things, to me, are just like amplifiers of different ways. For me, mushrooms, ayahuasca, and peyote and Huachuma all seem to have an innate intelligence, as opposed to just getting high. And those, once you learn to connect with the spirits of those, I think you get opened up to more. I think, in my opinion, ayahuasca is the most powerful, the most opening. The mescaline things open you up. It's almost broader. It's more broader. Like, I got so connected to the land down there in Huiracuta when I did the Huichol ceremony. I really felt the elementals and the spirits, but it was, for lack of better words, broader. Whereas ayahuasca can get very intense, then it can get broad, and it tends to fluctuate more. But, you know, they all tie in together. Ultimately, they are all what I consider elemental spirits.
There's a great quote in your last book that I saw, and I don't remember if it was in regards to ayahuasca or if it was in regards to 5-MeO DMT. And you were speaking with some provider, and they said 1/3 of what it shows you is the truth, 1/3 of what it shows you is a lie, and then you'd ask, like, what about the other third? And they just kind of like shrug their shoulders or something. In regards to ayahuasca, and then also 5-MeO DMT, I think this was in regards to 5-MeO DMT. How much do you feel is truth? How much is a lie? And then, what do you do with that? What do you do with such, when you see something that seems more real than real? How do you go about discerning that and what to do with all that?
Yeah, that's great. I love it. Good question. So to me, it makes you become more in the moment. And when you're in the moment, no matter what, if it's real to you in the moment, then it's real to you in the moment. Now, one of the things that the ayahuasca dieta does over 10 days, as the time goes by, you get physically weaker. And the boundaries between your conscious and your subconscious blur. And I've had amazing experiences where my dreams and my visions played into each other in an exquisite manner. And then I've gone through some hard life experiences that I don't think I would have survived if I hadn't gone through some things in ayahuasca first. So as I've done this work, my dreams and my visions have not only played into each other, but they have, for lack of better words, they have leaked into my everyday life. So my dreams and my visions and my everyday of life, which are all different states of consciousness, have all mixed and blurred. And this is, indigenous cultures say this, they have all blurred. As a result, my everyday life has become more dreamlike and more magic. So the art of altered states, in my opinion, especially with ayahuasca, is learning to navigate states of consciousness. I mean, even if you get up and you drink a good espresso in the morning and you're suddenly wired, well, you got to navigate that. You know, you could be driving down the street and have road rage and want to kill the guy in front of you because you're too spun up, right? So it's all about navigating states of consciousness. And if you realize it and you really pay attention to what's going on within yourself, you can go through, in a minute's time, you could go through probably 100 different states of consciousness in a minute. You know, I'm hungry, I'm horny, I'm mad, I'm happy. I mean, boom, 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 just like that. So when you learn to kind of get your bearings, regardless of what state you find yourself in, and you learn to navigate, you're working more toward the center, and you do what I like to say is you learn to get the whole band to play the same tune. And you get all of your shadow and all your sub-personalities. You pay attention and you listen. But when the crazy ones start getting too loud, for me, it's like, you, shut up, get in your room. You know, I do it in a loving manner, but I'm not listening to that.
Sure.
Shut up and get in your room. And I think you become more integrated into one more cohesive I, and you're more balanced and more centered. So no matter what's going on around you, you can maintain your peace in a very Zen, Buddhist-like way. And you become more even-tempered, you know, as you go. So it teaches you to stay in the moment, because you could be in a dream flying a pink horse with purple polka dots flying, and you're totally accepting in that moment, right? This is what's happening. So I like to think of it in that way. I hope that's a good answer.
What differences do you feel, if any, in regards to 5-MeO, differ between the synthetic pure kind or what you get as a toad secretion?
Yeah, and interesting question. I love that one too. So my first 5-MeO experience was in May of 1998. And at the time, hardly anybody knew what it was. And we were getting it in nice quantities from China. It was legal. Nobody really knew what it was. And I did a lot of work with it. And then I have had, I don't know, a number of smoking the real toad also. So there's a difference in the taste of it. But I like to think of it in this way. In fact, I've had pure mescaline, and I've had, you know, the San Pedro, the Huachuma, and the peyote. I like to think of it this way. Everything, I'm just going to use, I'm going to use the peyote as an example, but it applies to 5-MeO and the other things. When you do peyote, and mescaline is the psychoactive component, there are a number of other alkaloids that can characterize the experience in different ways. I like to think of it as spices. So there be little nuances of the experience that can change it. You can smoke pure 5-MeO synthesized, but when you smoke the toad venom, there's the bufotenin, there's a number of other chemicals that are in there that characterize the experience. So when you do it in the different ways, to me, it's like, okay, I can have chicken tandoori today and fried chicken tomorrow and baked chicken, right? Or whatever. It's still chicken. But the nuances of the experiences are a bit different each time. We did for a few years, we were doing we would put like one or two, well, not me, the guy I was working with, would put just one or two leaves of datura in the brew. And it radically changed the experience. You know, and we did it for a couple of years, and then finally he said, and he's a Peruvian vegetalista. He says, okay. He said, we don't really need to do that anymore. The chacruna brings plenty of colors and stuff, but it was worthwhile exploring that. And of course, in the jungle, on the different dietas, I've worked with a number of different plants in conjunction with ayahuasca. They call ayahuasca the mother of all the plants. So I've worked with tons of different plants in conjunction with it during the course of the dietas. So those things, to me, the differences change the quality of the experience in ways that spices change the quality of eating food in different ways. That's probably the best way I can characterize it.
That sounds great. Now I'm going to ask the impossible question. For those who are interested and haven't done it, can you explain what a 5-MeO or a Bufo toad experience, what that's like?
Yeah, it's like hitting hyperspace warp drive. It totally dissolves the ego. When I first did it, I didn't have any precedent, and I got so freaked out. Really rattled my whole core of reality. Like, whoa, And I didn't have anything. I was really on the edge with my buddy, trying it out. So it dissolves the ego. I think it goes right to the core of your brain. Like down, the brain is considered like the tripartite brain. There's the reptilian at the core, which is like instinct and survival. And then there's the neo-mammalian, which gets a little bit more warm and fuzzy and nurturing. And then there's the upper layer, the human layer, where there's more thought and logic. And I think that if you think about 5-MeO, it's done by a toad. It's toad venom as a survival mechanism. So it comes from that part of its brain or its physiology. It's like that. So I think it hits us at that core. And I think it'll take you through almost like, life flashing before your eyes and all those instincts and emotional survival mechanisms. I think it goes right to that and totally blows back the layers. They used to say, I don't know if they do now these days, the new sayings they have and all that, but they used to call the regular NN-DMT the power, and then the 5-MeO DMT was the glory. I've smoked the NN a bunch of times. I've never been a big fan of it. I always call it like a soundbite for ayahuasca. I prefer the 5 or 6 hour ceremony,
Okay.
where you really go deep with it. But I think it strips back the layers, and I don't think people should hit that unless they're really ready for a radical change. I think you should be at a certain point on your journey before you do it, so you can comprehend and embrace. Because, what happens with these experiences is you get blown out in non-rational ways, and then it takes days and weeks following for your intellectual mind to try to make sense of what happened, because it's overwhelming. So I think you should be at a certain point before you do it.
Definitely. I try to explain to people, and in a way to ward them off, I say it's a shotgun of God to your face, and that's usually enough for people to go, I don't think I want to do that. And I'm like, that's good. You shouldn't want to do it. And I would totally agree that I often say to people, like, how did you feel if everything you cared about now you didn't care about tomorrow? And they're like, what do you mean? Like,
I love it.
About money, and like, I know you're really interested in this job of yours. What if that shit just didn't matter anymore? Like, what if you woke up tomorrow and that was no longer what's important? And they're like, oh, that doesn't sound good. I'm like, then don't do 5-MeO DMT.
Dude, you're somebody I'd smoke it with, all right?
If you like your world now, then you touched on it a little bit, but then you've spoken a little bit, and I'll maybe try to cut that into this part. But who is 5-MeO best for? And then, what's the ideal setting?
Well, so I was part of a visionary art exhibit in Tor a few years ago. And I got invited to smoke some toad. I've already done it for a dozen years. But I said, yeah, sure, why not? And it was the real deal. It wasn't the synthesized. And it was at this beautiful place. They had a big room, and everybody surrounded whoever was doing it, and a nice, comfy, big pillowy thing. And it was a big love vibe. And they said, here's what's going on, and here's what we want you to do. And they all just sat with me. And I thought it was really, really well done. When I did it, and I've taken hundreds of people. The hell with McDonald's. I got billions served and all kinds of different things. But I took a lot of people on 5-MeO. And I always sat with them, and I monitored them very, very closely. Every nuance of their breath. I made sure I was present for them when they came out of it. And I would have, nice meditative music playing. And I would just let them come back and be right there for them, sort of ready to catch them when they come out of it, And then one of the things that happens is sometimes they come out of it and they instantly love you because they think you're the almighty God who gave them the great cosmic experience. And I let that pass a little bit. Then I go, hey, guess what? I'm here for you. I'm holding space, but I ain't all that. I'm just helping you to figure it out. So I think you really need to be present. I've seen people do like large groups of people, and I don't think that's good at all. I think everybody has an individual experience. I've seen people scream their ass off. I had one guy who screamed his ass off. And then I asked him, what was that all about? He says, what are you talking about? I was just fully blissed out. I'm like, okay. Because you don't know what's going to come out. I mean, somebody had been really traumatized, right?
I've seen
Yeah. So you just never know. So also it needs to be in a space that's safe and contained where they can scream if they have to and the cops aren't going to come, right? So a loving environment with nice music, maybe a little incense, something like that, but gentle and loving and being fully present for the person when they come back. That's the most important thing.
I saw someone have what looked like to be the worst experience of their life, and then afterwards they said it was the most beautiful thing they'd ever done. So, the outside of those trips doesn't always seemingly look like the inside. All right, well, those are great answers about 5-MeO. Microdosing in small amounts more frequently is getting to be a more popular thing, and I was hoping maybe you could answer this, because a small subset of people, and actually I know some people are doing it in Mexico more, are doing small amounts of ayahuasca a couple times a week. Do you know either anyone who does this presently, or do you know any medicine workers who have kind of done this, or this has been a part of their experience? What do you know about this kind of thing?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, everything I say is just about me. So I'm not. This is the truth of my universe, right? I'm always been a kamikaze personally, but one of the things I was doing, like when I was traveling all throughout Peru and the mountains and the jungles and all those places in the United States and Canada, I did an in-depth 2-year shamanic study program. And one of the things they did is they gave me some ayahuasca and they had me take a spoonful every night before bed. Just a spoonful, just a tiny bit to enhance my dreamings. Now, it's a proven fact that mushrooms at low doses increase edge perception and visual acuity. So I know people who have been doing it for years using low doses in that way. I've also used San Pedro, really small doses, as a tonic. It's very good, like that, to sharpen you just a little bit. But overall, I'm not and this is just me, I'm not a big fan of microdosing overall. It's like all or nothing for me most of the time, and that just happens to be my nature. But, I would do a little 00 cap of powdered San Pedro, and I could like really focus on work I'm getting done and stay very clear, and totally functional, And I have friends who are mixing psilocybin with other like shepherd's, some of the other mushrooms they use, and some people really swear by it. So I think it's useful. And all the stuff with the psychedelics now becoming sort of more accepted and mainstream, I think it's inevitable. But again, it all comes down to each unique individual, highly subjective experience for each person. Not everybody's a kamikaze. It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. No, definitely. Well, that ends a set of questions that I have. Is there, one, it'd be great if you could just, talk more about upcoming projects, and if you're doing any retreat-oriented stuff now, maybe what the next year will hold. And we have where they can find you online, but you can definitely toss that out again. And links will be in the YouTube and anywhere else this is kind of posted. So tell us about the next year. Tell us more, just tell us what's going on as we kind of wrap things up.
Yeah, well, it's interesting with this whole nuttiness, because the groups that I've been leading that come from my jungle people, and they've sanctioned them and blessed them and said, yeah, you're the person, and all that. They've been on hiatus now for a couple of years because of stuff. I recently led a smaller group. I made everybody just get a test, and that worked out well. But I've also, I've been writing for close to 40 years, and I've been teaching writing at major writers' conferences for over 30. And so a lot of the places I would do writers' conferences and book festivals and appearances and lectures on shamanism and writing, all that's dried up for 2 years now. So I'm focusing more on the online stuff. So my website is mattpallamary.com, mattpallamary.com. And my publishing company is Mystic Ink Publishing. It's MYSTICINKPUBLISHING.com. And my stuff can be found there. So I've been laying a bit low on the public stuff because of the unpredictability, and all the people are uneasy about the way that the it's unfolding. So I've been focused mostly on my writing. I'm now working on a book. I'm calling it The Anthropoholographic Man. And I'm tying in with some of the ancient things of Egypt and sacred geometry, and then modern technology and holograms, and showing the basis of all the connections between the inner human, all the interconnections in the planet, and the cosmic connections, and how they're all ultimately holographic. So I'm doing a lot of research and a lot of work on that. And that's keeping me busy and off the streets, so to speak.
Great. Well, I will definitely, if I make it back stateside again, definitely look you up in regards to what kind of ceremonies you're up to, because I've yet to do a full ayahuasca ceremony. I've done Changa a couple of times, but not a proper ayahuasca ceremony. So that's definitely on my to-do, and I don't necessarily want to trek down to the Amazon. I've lived in Latin America enough, so it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but my experiences in the jungle were less than desirable.
Yeah, so right.
It's maybe not the highest thing on my to-do. Okay, as always, like the video, subscribe, do that stuff. But let's talk about the free resource. The free resource is a playlist. You're gonna see one or two different ones, and it's gonna cover just the best about ayahuasca, or the best about retreats, or 5-MeO DMT, whatever is. We can find the best content. It's going to be some of my content. It's going to be some from other people's content. It's going to be the ultimate learning resource on videos on YouTube. So go and check that out. As always, like, subscribe, follow this channel, because this is what you're interested in, if you're interested in psychedelics, if you're interested in personal growth, and you're interested in meditation and the spiritual aspects of that, this video is going to cover it. We're going to be talking to the best people out there and getting you just the best content on that. And it's always going to be fun and entertaining. So like, subscribe, do all that, comment below, tell me what you need to know, what questions you have for Mateo, or maybe some future guests. Let me know, and I will get that answered for you. Either I'll do it, or I will get someone like Mateo to answer it for you. All right. Talk to you guys soon in the comments, and hope you enjoy the rest of the videos coming out.